Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Display Line podcast. I'm your host, Ollie,
And I'm your other host, Joey.
and today we'll be talking you through aviation events, news, takeoff Thursdays, and Hampshire Air Festival. So, first in the news, Joey, would you like to take us through your space news?
Yeah, so obviously, um, we know about Artemis being delayed. I think was that edited? Did we edit that into the last one?
Yeah, so Artemis has been delayed by about a month. I think Dan said that we couldn't talk about that segment and he just took it out of the podcast. But that's all right.
Mm.
We'll talk about it closer to the time when we have a lot more details on that anyway. So yeah,
Yeah, I
Artemis has
believe
been
that
pushed
was a
back to
hydrogen leak.
so hydrogen leak. Dan put
Yeah,
that in the edit last podcast. So yeah, it's been pushed back to I think March 19th now is planned for the next launch. Joey, you can
yeah,
correct
something
me on
like that.
that.
I don't actually know. I think it's early to mid March at some point if it
Yeah.
doesn't get delayed again.
And do you have
Um,
another section of space news for us?
yeah. So if anyone keeps up with SpaceX, with what they're doing with Starship and stuff, the next Booster 19, I think. It has completed all of its tests, whatever it needs to do. I think they'll be rolling that out to the pad at some point within the next few days, maybe even by the time this is up. And then they will proceed to do tests on the ship too, and hopefully we'll get a flight within the next month or two.
Well, that is definitely a big step in the space community, and Joey is basically our expert here. I'm obviously more aviation, air show, that sort of side, and we have Joey here, who keeps up to date with all the space news, especially Artemis and SpaceX and things like that. However, as we get onto the aviation section, the first bit of news that we have happened on February 5th when a Scandinavian Airlines Airbus A320 took off on a taxiway at Brussels Airport. So, yeah, Joey, go on.
Yeah, that was quite. I remember hearing about this on Twitter, obviously, and I didn't believe it at first. I did not believe it. I was like, "How could that happen?" But uh, it did. Um, I don't think there's any footage of this happening, but there was no injuries, luckily. It got up there, to be fair. It was like 100 and something mile an hour.
I think it was
Um,
123 miles per hour that it got to before the pilots aborted the takeoff run.
yeah, you think they'd realise a lot sooner than that, to be honest.
I mean,
Um,
that is very, very
but
close to sort of V1 rotate speed there.
yeah, they could have risked an overrun even stopping at that point. It
Exactly.
possibly would have been safer to take off by then.
So yeah, there was 165 people on board, no injuries, no deaths, nothing of the sort. Everyone was taken back to the terminal and disembarked from the aircraft just so they could check the brakes and the wheels and things like that because they would have had to brake so hard that the discs of the brakes would have overheated and caused some damage internally in the gear. And of course, even
Mm.
the pilots would have been a bit shuddered from that taking off from a taxiway.
Yeah, they definitely would have had a number to call after that one.
Yeah, so that happened. So more airline news though. Indigo, which is India's largest airline, is starting to cut down on their long haul flights due to financial issues and operational
Mm.
constraints. So they're cutting their flights from Delhi to Copenhagen and Delhi to London Heathrow and Manchester as well due to these costs. Joey, do you want to take us through a few of those facts?
Yeah, so I know that they are reducing frequencies for some flights. I'm not 100% sure on how much by, but are they winding it down to zero, I think?
Yeah, they're suspending all the flights. So they're gonna reduce the frequency from 5 to 0. So on one week it'll be 5, the next week it'll be 4, then 3, then 2, then 1 until it gets to 0. So you still be able to fly for a few weeks, but obviously as the weeks go on and on and on, it'll just become less and less and less.
Yeah, obviously there are other airlines you can take to fly from those locations, but you can't do that one anymore. Well, you can, but eventually you won't be able to.
So this is sort of a crisis within the Indigo community and airline, and it's been happening since 2025. So it's a
Mm,
scheduling crisis that began in 2025. They saw thousands of flight cancelled from Delhi and the airline, and these are mainly due to things like airspace closures. Sorry, especially linked to geopolitical tensions or overflight restrictions. Now we move on to the sort of scary or disheartening news, depending on which way you see it. And we start off with Cuba, which is facing a mass jet fuel crisis, and then many airlines are now starting to suspend all flights to and from Cuba due to this. Otherwise, they have to bring fuel for the journey there and the journey back, meaning it's going to be well overweight on landing to Cuba, and it's just not going to be worth it to get passengers to and from, really.
yeah, it's obviously a good place for holiday destinations. It's even a good stop off to many others, but I guess it's currently a no-go.
Yeah, so this is mainly due to sort of the invasion of Venezuela and the Cuba backing Venezuela, which means that the US is sort of blocking all jet fuel and oil and things like that they need to the island, meaning that it's just basically impossible to get to and from unless you bring that excess fuel, which no airline really wants because it's just so
Yeah,
inefficient and it's definitely makes things like landings a lot harder. Takeoffs require a lot more thrust and engine damage can occur from this extra fuel.
yeah, you'd obviously also have to have less people in the plane, so less takeoff weight to begin with.
Yeah, exactly, and it's just not something that anyone wants to do. It's not sustainable for the airline or really Cuba itself, considering that it has no fuel to offer. Now, more unfortunate aviation news. Pictures are starting to surface of a Fokker 50 that crashed today on the 10th of February 2026. Joey, do you want to take us through some of that?
Yeah, so this crashed around 15 minutes after takeoff. There'll be probably a picture on screen if you're watching somewhere with video. But it was, I think it was fine. I think everyone was fine.
Yeah, everyone
Around
survived.
50 passengers,
Yeah,
a
so
couple of
there's
them injured.
believed to be about 50 passengers, 5 crew. I believe there are some minor injuries sustained, but nothing too serious, luckily. So everyone's unharmed. But yeah, we'll put a picture up on the YouTube if you're watching there, just so you can sort of
Yeah,
see the extent of the crash. It's nothing too bad, luckily. It's just a
yeah,
shame that this plane came down. This plane actually I searched up was made in 1990 and has served ever since, really, and has the registration
yeah,
of 60 YAS. So
yeah,
it's been flying for well over 30, 35 years, that sort of range there, and operation.
yeah. It crashed on a beach, or near enough to a beach. There was no major injuries. Thankfully, it landed just in the water, so there was no fire, nothing like that. Although a wing did snap off, I believe.
Yes, I think both wings were definitely severely damaged, if not both came off. I know
Mm,
one 100% came off, but I can't
yeah.
actually remember if both came off. But we can see it on the screen
Mm,
right now. Now, adding on to this sort of unfortunate news and military news combined, the Red Arrows have confirmed that they will not be attending RIAT this year, which is a huge shock to the general public attending. As they're always a fan favorite. They're sort of someone, or a team that always goes and is expected to go every year. So I'm pretty sure that they are going to America. I'm not sure if that's confirmed yet, but they definitely are going abroad somewhere to display at places like Oshkosh instead of RIAT this year.
yeah, I haven't seen that they've confirmed this, but I think it is pretty much nearly confirmed. I think they are going to Oshkosh for America's 250th birthday. Uh, for some reason. But I believe the last time they didn't go to Riyadh was 2019 during their America tour. Um,
Yes, I believe it was because
yeah,
I went that year and I don't remember seeing them. So yeah, I believe it was 2019 the last time that they didn't go. But like I said, it's just a huge shock to everyone because everyone wants to see the Red Arrows. It doesn't matter how many times you've seen them. You could have seen them 10 times, 20 times, 100 times. It never gets old, really. It's a new display each year, especially with all the new, uh, like Red 2, Red 3, all the new trainees, especially.
yeah. I know that I will definitely be missing out on this one because I personally only see them once or twice a year, and it was my second time going to Riyadh, and it's not going to have one of the major displays of the show.
Now, on to part two of our podcast, Joey. We speak about Hampshire Air Festival. So last week you spoke about Blackpool, which is your sort of area of expertise, and now we move on down completely down to the south to Thruxton Aerodrome, which is where it's being hosted this year.
Yeah, obviously this is your sort of area of expertise. You are nearish to the area. Um, it's your local air show, I think. Um,
I think it is the localist air show because last year it was based at Leon Solent, and a few years before that, it's sort of the Victory Day um, Air Festival. But now it's been moved, unfortunately, about 30-45 minute drive away from me to Thruxton Aerodrome.
yeah, obviously you'll know more about this than I do, so I'll let you uh, tell us some fun facts about this air show.
Yeah, so like I said, it's based in Thruxton Aerodrome in Hampshire, and it's on the 12th and 13th of September this year. So just after the school, college, that sort of stuff returns, unfortunately. So it's not quite in the summer break, um, but it's for everyone really. It's for families. It's for aviation enthusiasts like myself, and photographers as well, videographers. It's always a great event to get videos and pictures at. When it's not windy, because on the Saturday last year when I went, it was just terrible weather. They got about three planes in the air before they had to actually cancel that day. But on the Sunday, it was beautiful weather. It was a lot colder, but it was still beautiful, beautiful sunny day, and we've got quite a lot of action, including things like Spitfires, like we've spoken about last week in the Takeoff Thursday. We got the Gazelle, a singular blue and white Gazelle that came down, which is always nice. We got the Wing Walkers, that's always a fan favourite. We also spoke about them last week. We got the Yak 52, that's what it is, the Yak 52, that came down as well. So that's slightly different to the Yak 3 that we mentioned in the previous week. Um, we also
Yeah.
get the Catalina, which again we also spoke about last week. You're sort of seeing a theme between all these air shows, all usually having quite similar planes. So, if you listen to other podcasts like the Air Show Room, you'll know a special woman called Helen Webb. She was the organizer and a marketing specialist for RIAT back in the 2000s and 2010s. So she was a main person in organizing RIAT, and she's been confirmed to be organizing Hampshire this year, which is very exciting. As we've already confirmed, quite a few aircraft that are going, quite unique aircraft that we'll get to in the next section of the podcast. So, as we all know, Hampshire has quite a rich aviation air show history with things like Farnborough that go on every year. There used to be a show called Wings and Wheels at Dunsfold Aerodrome. That was always amazing. That's just up in like places like Guildford. And these events are huge to Hampshire. They bring in a lot of money, especially to Farnborough with the industry days and stuff. And a public flying festival with all the new inventions. And sometimes you do get things like A320s flying, just like at the Saudi Arabia air show that happened. You get things like the 777. You get some of these nice new aircraft. I think there was a drone there that went last year or the year before that. That was also pretty cool to see. So that was a new invention that they brought out just to fly for the public. So it's nice that we've sort of got a brand new air show in the terms that it's moved airports and there's new sort of directors for the air show. So Joey, have you ever considered coming down south just for this air show? I know you come down for Riyadh sometimes. So have you ever sort of considered coming a bit further south for this?
I have, to be fair. I've thought that one day I probably will go to a lot more air shows than other years because it gets quite boring for most of the year seeing air shows happening on live streams and stuff and just not being able to go. But when I get a car, I will hopefully do a year where I just go to as many air shows as I can, and this will probably be one of the air shows I go to.
Yeah, exactly. That's what how I can finally convince my mum because I said, "Well, look, I've been watching React for the last 5 years and we won't be able to go. Can we finally go this?" And she's like, "Yeah, why not?" So I'm going with my mum to React, and I believe my dad or mum again to Thruxton, or Hampshire Air Festival as it's now known as.
Hmm. How long have you been going to uh, this air show?
Yeah, so I've been going since I believe 2014 when it was still based at Leon Solon EGHF as the iCal code. And I remember going my entire family really. My grandma went, my dad, mum, sister, we all went for the victory days that they held there. And I always remember seeing the Spitfires and always bringing out my little red camera that would take really crappy pictures from absolutely miles away. But it's always a memory. I'll try and find some of those pictures and put it up on the screen to see if I can actually show you some of these pictures that I took in my early days when I was, 5, 6 years old.
Yeah, obviously there was from Blackpool Airshow, there was the picture that was on the screen from 2013.
Yeah.
That was my mum that took that just on her phone, I'm pretty sure. But you had a camera, you said, in
Yeah, so it's just one of
2014.
those really,
A
really
GoPro camera.
small. Yeah, so it's just really sort of like very tiny box camera. If you're watching on the YouTube, you can sort of see the size of it. It wasn't very big. Its battery ran out after about an hour of taking pictures and videos, so it really wasn't that big of a camera. But it was my first ever camera, and I always take pride in the photos I took when I can find them. So I do have some pictures from Wings on Wheels that if I can't find, I'll put up on the screen on the YouTube anyway.
Yeah, I assume if it's a very grainy picture, it was probably the one from 2014.
Yeah, so the pictures will probably be really bad quality. I don't really edit the ones from then because I just know how bad they are. But it's always nice looking back on these old memories and how I've sort of progressed as a photographer and a person as well. So now as we move on to part three, I know section two is very short, but we have had very limited time to actually research about this new air show that's coming up. So we'll move on to the bit that we have actually been able to research, which is the Takeoff Thursday. So we'll start off with the auto gyro that's been announced for Midlands Air Festival, which we do have a podcast in itself coming up very soon. So Joey, do you want to take us through some of the basic facts of the auto gyro?
Yeah, yeah. So obviously the auto gyro, it's not is I don't think it's a helicopter or a plane. I believe it's its own category. Uh, Gyrocopter, I think.
Yeah.
It has a rotor on the top and one on the back.
Yes.
It's quite a unique aircraft. It's really interesting to see fly. It is. It goes to many air shows. It goes to uh, Blackpool Airshow. It goes to Hampshire Airshow. It goes to all the major ones around the UK. It's certainly something to see. Obviously, you've got the smoke trailing behind it. Um, I think you probably know more about the gyro than me.
Yeah, so the gyrocopter is a free spinning blade on the top of it, so the very, very top blade, and then it has just a tiny propeller behind just for the forward thrust. So the free spinning blade basically just spins on the airflow as it's going through. So as that rear motor is pushing it through the air, the front blade sort of spins just through airflow, wind, and just the air moving around it, and it literally makes it sound like an actual helicopter, like it is a powered blade. And I'm sure many people probably thought that it was a powered blade until the commentators they did their own research and found out that it was completely free spinning and absolutely no electrical power is going into that blade. It is completely spinning on its own.
Yeah, I know. I only learnt that one fairly recently. I think it was last year. I've been going to Blackpool Air for a long time, and I never really realised that it did not have electrical power to that main propeller.
Yeah, so the history of this is actually pretty interesting. Made in 1923, it was made by a Spanish designer by the name Juan de la Servia. I probably butchered the names terribly, but I'm not very good at Spanish names. And these autogyros were mainly used for things like observation or mail transport, and sometimes short field operations, like farmers would usually use them for things like that. However, they were very quickly replaced actually in the 1940s by the invention of the helicopter. So helicopters completely took it over. They were more efficient, and obviously, as the autogyro can't hover and it can only do short landings, sort of like the F-35, it just sort of became out of use pretty quickly as they got these helicopters that could vertically land and vertically take off, and were a bit more practical throughout World War II and sort of the start of the Cold War. But they did
Yeah,
come back in the 1950s and 60s, but again, mainly for mail and farmers to use. Um, and they did start to get more of a use in aerial photography. So there's quite a few pictures out there. We'll see if we can find one of aerial photography from gyrocopters. And they were used in sport flying as well. So in little competitions, we've seen other gyrocopters. Um, they were used then, yeah.
yeah. And I think something interesting is how slow these things can go. Obviously, it's got the rotor on top, which kind of keeps it in the air a little bit more than a normal plane. Um, it can really go slower than most planes, I believe.
Yeah, so we'll talk through some of the stats as we sort of got onto that. So it has two seats, and it is powered by a Rotax 912 or 914 engine, sort of depending on the variant of gyro you get. It ranges between 100 and 115 horsepower, again, depending on what variant of the gyro you get, and has a cruise speed of about 70 to 100 knots, depending on the conditions. So, depending whether you're going to headwind, tailwind, sidewind, those sort of things, and has a max speed of 120 knots. I believe that is just straight fly instead of a dive. So, that tiny engine is producing, well, like I said, about 115 horsepower, pushing it to those speeds of about 120 knots.
Yeah, and this thing can go quite high considering, how long ago it was made and what it is in general. It can go about 13,000 feet, I believe. It probably get a bit higher, but I assume they will just try and keep it at that to the max.
Yeah, so obviously it can't stall really, so it doesn't really matter how high it goes in that aspect. It can go incredibly slow. It's sort of made for slow speed, and it has an incredibly fast takeoff run of only 50 to 200 meters, depending on sort of head and tailwind, things like that. Because obviously it doesn't have have any wings or anything. It just completely goes off the lift generated by that top rotor. Um, so yeah, it was very interesting history coming through from the 1920s and still flying about over 100 years later after the first model was test flight and made.
Yeah, and obviously this is a unique history and unique aircraft in general. I don't know how many there are, uh, but I think in terms of variants of gyrocopter, there is not that many.
Yeah, so there's really not too many different types of gyrocopter, but if you do look around, there's probably up to about 20 variants of different gyrocopter, which is sort of in the middle. There's not too many of them, but again, there's not too little of them. They are definitely something that you can find, even if you just go down to your local airport. I know there's a few down at mine. But the Autogyro always goes to places like Midlands. It's an amazing little helicopter, and it can get very close to the crowd as well because it is sort of made to do that. And yeah, it's always a very fast aircraft as well, considering like there's just one tiny motor on the back of it.
Yeah, I know. When we went to Blackpool Airshow, it came really close to the crowd. Then we both got some great pictures of that. I'm sure there'll be one on screen. Um, but it really is unique in how close it can get to the crowd, and not a lot of aircraft can do that.
So, as we move on to the second announcement, which is the Extreme Air XA41, we've got loads of facts about this aircraft, so stay tuned for this. So the Extreme Air can also be known as the S-Back 300, which we'll actually get onto more facts about why it's called that slightly later on in the podcast, in about 5-10 minutes. It's a single-seat aerobatic aircraft, German-built and manufactured, and it was made for competitions, especially the unlimited aerobatic category. So where they can basically do whatever they want, how high they want, how low they want. Basically, they can just do whatever they want. It's made for just pushing the aircraft to its absolute limits, which for this aircraft is plus and negative minus 10 Gs.
Yeah, so obviously you get fighter pilots pulling around 9 Gs, bit faster speed, but these pilots in these planes are pulling up to 10 Gs, maybe even sometimes a little bit more if they want to push it beyond its maximum. And uh, it's it's quite the roller coaster for them in there.
Yeah, so obviously the cockpit is made of composite carbon, which is just very nice monocoque to be in, really. Like I said, it's a single seat. It has a one-piece wing, so that wing is literally directly attached onto the fuselage. There's no cuts in between it. And the control surfaces were designed for low control forces at a high sort of angle of attack, so AOA. And it has a tail wheel configuration for the gear structure. So it has one wheel at the back, two at the front, just like many aerobatic aircraft, like the extra EA 300 and 330.
So obviously you've seen this aircraft, I assume, multiple times. It going to Hampshire. I don't believe I've seen it display. I could be wrong on that, but how is the display?
Yeah, so it's always an amazing display. I can't remember if I've seen the guy flying it at Hampshire, but I know I have seen an Extreme Air before at previous air shows at Dunsfold Wings and Wheels, and it's always an amazing display. It takes off so fast. We're just talking about how the Autogyro takes off at about 50 meters, but this thing probably matches it. It probably goes about 200-300 meters, which is sort of the maximum range of the Autogyro. Takes off straight into a knife edge with smoke on. It's such an amazing display to see. And later on in the display, he drew a happy face in the sky, and he was upside down drawing the circle, so for the actual face itself. And honestly, it's just crazy seeing how these pilots train for this as well. As we said, it can take up to 10 and negative 10 Gs, which is for the pilot, that's 10 times your own body weight, or 10 times not your own body weight.
Yeah. So obviously you mentioned it taking off really quick. What is the top speed of this aircraft?
So the top speed of this aircraft is 416 kilometers an hour, and its cruising speed is about 342. So much faster than the gyro, about 4 times quicker than the gyro, but obviously still isn't that fast in terms of aircraft itself. It uses a Lycoming AEIO 580B1A six-cylinder aerobatic piston engine that creates about 350 horsepower, which creates this pretty immense speed. 400 kilometers an hour is quite fast for an aerobatic aircraft. It uses an MT propeller, which is a three-bladed propeller, so you usually have two there and then one at the bottom poking down. And it has a max operating altitude of 15,000 feet, so about 2,000 feet more than the gyrocopter. So the history of this aircraft, as mentioned before, it's called the S-Bac 300, also known as the Extreme Air, and this comes from a guy called Philip Steinbach. There you go, you get it from Steinbach, S-Bac, and I don't actually know where the 300 came from. I couldn't find that in the research. But he began work in the early 2000s, so between 2003 and 2005 was sort of the first prototype of the plane, but it didn't actually fly until 2006, so about a year after the first prototypes had come out of production. And in the early 2010s, it was in sort of mass production. It was one of the top aerobatic aircraft of the years following. So for about 5-6 years before things like the extra EA 300 and 330 came in, it was a dominant aerobatic aircraft.
Yeah, and I will probably assume that the 300 got its name from the extra 300s.
Yeah, it could well be. Honestly, I could not find it in the research. I did try and dig where the 300 came from, but I couldn't find it. But it may well be it did come from being rivals of the extra 300. So we will put a picture up of on the screen of this aircraft like we usually do. Last week was a little bit sloppy. We was getting very close to the deadline, and obviously we already had issues on the editing end anyway. So we sort of just decided to put a few pictures up so it's just to show you some of the aircraft. We had a lot more pictures that we wanted to put on, but like I said, it was getting so close to the deadline. So, Joey, we're coming to the end of the podcast now, unfortunately. This week has been a bit sloppy. We do apologise. We have had not very much time to do research. We've been very busy with college. Well, I personally have, and Joey's been busy with sort of family life. So, we're sorry for this week being a bit sloppy. There hasn't been too many aircraft announcements. But by next week, when the first takeoff Thursdays come out, that should be the first best podcast overall. So, Joey, do you want to sort of wrap up the podcast? What have we sort of talked about today?
Yeah, so we started with some rocket news with Starship completing its tests. We did Artemis. We talked about that being delayed. Only briefly mentioned as we did that last week as well. There was some aviation news. We had the A320 that nearly took off on the taxiway somehow. We had Indigo cutting long haul flights. We had the Cuba jet fuel crisis. I don't know if it's called that, but I'm calling it that now. We had the crash landing on the beach, but there was not, considering last week, there was not actually that much news to cover. Um, we may have just not been keeping up with it, but there wasn't a whole lot of news to cover.
Yeah, like I said,
Then
we
we
didn't
went
really get
over,
too much time to do our
yeah,
research. Some of this was in the last couple of days that we were able to make some of this news, and obviously today we saw the Fokker, so we decided to throw that in last minute, as that only did happen a few hours ago of recording this podcast. Um, so yeah, of course, we also went through Hampshire Airshow as well, and some of the new announcements to Midlands and Hampshire, and hopefully by next week, RIAT will have some of their own. Unfortunately, the date is now confirmed to the 19th instead of the first week or the second week of February, so that's slightly annoying. But other than that, this podcast is probably over for this week.
yeah,
So take care, everyone, and we will see you next week for some RIA announcements. Bye bye.
bye bye.